I'm going to start the webcast and you can.
I'll wait 30 seconds. Thanks, Tim. I'd like to welcome everybody to this board of Waterloo Regional Police Service and start with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge the land on which we gather today is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral people. We acknowledge the enduring presence of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today, their achievements and their contributions to our community. We offer this acknowledgement as an act of reconciliation between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples of Canada. I now ask, does any board member have a declaration of pecuniary interest to declare? Seeing none. Our agenda is presentation by the Ipsos Reid Member Census and Survey 2020. I'd like to welcome Sean Simpson and Mitra Thompson from Ipsos, who will be providing a presentation with the results of member census and survey. I don't know, Chief, do you want to introduce things? Over to you.
Good morning, Chair Redmond and members of the board, and it's a pleasure to be joined by members of the Chief Strategic Advisory Council, as well as Mr. Sean Simpson, Vice President of Ipsos Reid and a resident of Waterloo Region, as well as Ms. Mitra Thompson, one of the principals working on the member census survey, and also joining us, who's done significant work with the internal work of the strategic plan and supporting the Police Services Board. We have Ms. Amanda Franchini from our Strategic Services, as well as Ms. Margaret Glode, our Manager of Strategic Services. And it's a pleasure on behalf of Deputy Chief Crowell and Deputy Chief Hilton to have Sean and Mitra join us today. We've had an excellent collegial relationship with our independent Ipsos Reid team who have been surveying and providing census. And this follows on work that they actually completed for the Police Services Board and the Police Service in 2014. And so it provides an excellent opportunity for us as an organization, as a board, and as accountable to our community, abilities to measure, monitor, evaluate the work we're doing, as well as set a path forward, which I think is extremely important at all times, but particularly in the evolution of policing and the way that we provide policing services to the citizens of Waterloo Region, but also how, as we modernize and continue to grow our internal membership. And so over the next 45 minutes, we have a slide deck presentation that Sean and Mitra will take the board through. We look forward to your questions and comments. And again, this really is a foundation for setting how we do work internally, as well as how we provide services and continue to evolve the level of service delivery to our community. And so again, thanks for the opportunity. Very pleased to welcome Mr. Simpson and Ms. Thompson. And again, equally proud that Mr. Simpson is a resident of our region, which is unique and obviously brings a unique perspective. So over to you, Mr. Simpson and Ms. Thompson. It's great to see both of you.
Welcome.
Thank you very much, Chair Redmond and Chief Larkin. As the Chief said, yes, I'm a very proud longtime resident of the community. In fact, I'm dialing in from, I calculated it, 260 meters from Central Division. I live downtown, so it's nice to be so close. I'm just setting up my slide share here. And if you could just nod that in fact, there we go, perfect, wonderful. So just a quick note on the methodology, what we did. We surveyed members of the service online, and we got a very good solid response rate. Over half responded despite being a very long survey, and a good distribution from senior ranks to right down to constable and civilian members. We were in field for about a month last fall, which ensures that we miss any vacations and give everybody the opportunity to participate. 47-minute survey. It's a long one, so members could, pause and continue at a later time. All of this is done to help response rates. And as the Chief said, we can compare the results for a lot of the questions back to the spring of 2014. So trending is very helpful because it means that the results don't exist in a vacuum. We know whether we're making progress or not since 2014. And because all of the members were invited to participate and given the opportunity to do so, it's actually a census. So there is no margin of error. It is what it is based on response rates, much like the census would be for Canada, for example. I've got 10 key findings, which I'll relay to you right now before we get into the detailed slides, because we've got a lot to get through. So the detailed slides I'll probably move through fairly quickly, but this helps to frame our discussion. And the first is that the WRPS membership is, in fact, more reflective of the community that it serves today, but there's still room to improve. Compared to 2014, there's a greater gender balance and a better representation across ethnicity and sexual orientation, but visible minorities, those not born in Canada, are still underrepresented within the service. The second is really good news. Job satisfaction is widespread and stronger than we measured back in 2014. Most are satisfied with their job. And not only that, but they say that they're working in the position they want to. They believe that career opportunities exist. They aspire towards management. All these things which mean that people are sticking around for the long haul. Support for the board's direction and the strategic plan, the influence that it has on members continues to grow. Most support the direction of the board, and they know what the unit's priorities are. And even though it's only a minority, 45%, that's up 12 points from 2014. They say that this strategic business plan is actually influencing their daily work and decisions. Right? So there's a greater connection between the high-level strategic decisions that the board and the chief are making with his team and the way that regular members, the rank and file members, are living those strategies. The data are very clear that the WRPS is a better place to work than it was in 2014. More believe it's ethical, that it's free from harassment, that there's equal opportunity for members, for development members, regardless of their rank and orientation and identity. There have also been improvements in the feelings of transparency, but there's still room to grow there for sure. This fifth one isn't unique to the police service, but high workloads and staffing issues make many feel unable to give their best. There's resource crunches everywhere, and a majority disagree that staffing levels are adequate. It's just the feeling that we need more bodies in the service to help better distribute the load. 1 in 4 think the amount of work they have to do is unreasonable. 4 in 10 believe that the workload is shared fairly. And maybe that's the more significant one. Is people don't mind working hard as long as everybody's rowing in the same direction and carrying their weight. And so as a result, people are feeling rushed, and that maybe quality is struggling as a result. The sixth finding is that there is an acknowledgement that there's greater attention being paid to mental health and work-life balance. Not only is it a greater priority for each member individually, but they believe that it's a greater priority for their supervisor and for the WRPS at large. And as a result, that the service is providing sufficient support for mental well-being. That's up 20 points, very significant change since 2014. Members are feeling more equipped to cope, that sort of work-life balance and being able to manage, but challenges remain. We see that it's less likely for members to say that their mental health is being negatively impacted by their work, but it still impacts sleep. That's going to happen on shift work, eating habits, self-care, etc. And so there's maybe actually a greater desire, since you've done such a good job on mental health over the last 6 or 7 years. Yes, there's more work to be done, but to bring up that sort of physical health aspect over the next couple of years as well. There is an acknowledgement, a belief among some that there are some communications challenges within the service. Overall satisfaction is pretty high at 81%, but only roughly 6 in 10 say that they usually get the information they need, and only 62% rate the manager's communication skills is excellent or good. So as a service overall, doing a pretty good job, but maybe there's one-on-one interactions where it might be an opportunity for training of managers and improving the communication flow there. As a result of the reasonably high levels of satisfaction in communications, people are feeling better informed about what's going on here at the WRPS. But 1 in 3 still feel uninformed about what's going on in the organization, but on balance, more are feeling more knowledgeable, which is good news. There's still a little bit of credibility gap among about 1/4 of members who say they have some degree of skepticism about the credibility of the information that they hear from the WRPS. So, continuing to improve communications will build that trust over time, and skepticism should decrease as a result. And the final key finding here is that training for direct reports appears to be hampered by staffing and shift schedules. It's not just good enough to provide training, but one needs to take an active role in facilitating it and ensuring that members have the opportunity to pause their day-to-day jobs and take the training at a time that suits them and that works well with their schedule. So that's still an opportunity for enhancement. So these are the top 10 findings that we'll see reflected, I think, in the data. There's certainly more in here, and we'll dive right into that. We'll start with the member census, and what we're able to do is compare the demographic composition of the WRPS to the Waterloo Region CMA, the Census Metro Area. There's, some of this isn't much of a concern. Others we'll spend a little bit more time. Age, don't worry about that too much. Obviously, people retire, in their 60s usually, and the census obviously doesn't stop at 60. We do see here that under gender identity, there is still a skew towards more male membership than female. 49% of the region is male, identifies as male, but 55% of the service does. So we still have a gender skew there. Education, it's a very educated service, so that's great news. Relationship status, don't worry too much about that. Visible minority, that's an interesting one. 19% of the residents of the community say that they're a visible minority, but only 7% of the members of the service do, so lagging significantly there. Certainly related to that, 23% of the residents of the region say that they were born outside of Canada. Only 11% of members of the service say that they're born outside Canada. So there's a gap there as well. The good news on gender identity is that we are making progress. Back in 2014, it was a 60-40 split between male female. Now we've cut the gap by half. So maybe in another 6 or 7 years, when I'm back here, we will have achieved parity. Maybe it'll be even sooner. But making strides in the right direction here. Nobody on the service identified as non-binary, or the 1% say that they prefer to use the they or them pronoun instead of the masculine or feminine. In terms of age distribution within the service, it's a normal curve. This makes a lot of sense. However, I would caution you on one thing, and that is that the service appears to be getting older. Back in 2014, we only had about 43% of the service that was in their 30s or 20s, and now it's down to 40%. Not a significant difference, but if I were to come back in a couple of years and we see that trend continue, that's going to be concerning because at some point those people are going to retire and you're going to have a bit of a gap, right? So we see that there's an increase on the 50+ side of things, a decrease on the people in their 20s or 30s. So just be mindful that you need to have a steady stream of young people, otherwise your service is going to age and age and age, and at some point that's going to catch up to you. On the LGBTQ2S+ identity, 5% is better than the 3%, more representative than the 3% we had last time. This is not something that we capture at a CMA level in the census that we were able to identify, but our kind of conventional wisdom suggests that it's usually around 10% in metropolitan areas. So my guess here, my informed estimate here is that you are underrepresenting members of the LGBTQ2S+ community at the service. In terms of education, that's sort of neither here nor there. City or township, we actually see that nearly 3 in 10 members of the service say they live outside of the region, and those who are within the region generally are distributed as the population falls around the region. In terms of the proportion who were not born in Canada, back in 2014, 8% of the members said they weren't born in Canada. It's risen to 11. So again, moving in the right direction. But as I showed you, still almost by half underrepresenting foreign born within the service. And when we look at the country of birth, where these people are coming from, it's still very much a sort of Eurocentric pattern of immigration. And that is not the current trend more broadly at large. We're finding that the diaspora that are growing within Canada and the community are generally South and Southeast Asian. And so you'll want to definitely think about the representation of those communities within the service. And here again, this just shows once again the ethnic origins very, very much skewed towards European countries. Canadian, obviously, European countries are maybe the next 7 or 8. And so just be thinking about how we can better reflect those communities, in particular from South Asia, Southeast Asia, where there's a lot of immigration. Religion, sort of an interesting trend here. Fewer identifying as Christian, more identifying as having no affiliation or atheist or agnostic, and still a very small representation of Muslim, Sikh, Hindu, Buddhist, Jewish individuals, or those with indigenous spirituality as well. So just be mindful of that. And the main language spoken at home definitely skews towards English. Tagalog, for example, is a fast-growing diaspora and language within Canada and the community. And so just be thinking about how you might be representing those communities going forward. Back in 2014, we asked about disabilities overall, and it was 4% who said they identified as having a disability. This year, it's 5. We split it out into 2. 5% say that they have a mental disability, a chronic illness. 6% a physical disability or chronic illness. Some with both, so you can't just add them together. And it's not that people necessarily are more likely to have disabilities. It's that we are becoming better in acknowledging and understanding what constitutes a disability, and therefore we're more sensitive to those matters. Depending on how you define a disability, it can range from 20% of the population. A lot of that is informed by age, obviously. Once you get in the 60s or 70s, people are more likely to say they have disability, chronic pain. But some organizations like banks, for example, that we work for have a very, very broad net of what constitutes disability. Upwards of 30-35% of the population could qualify based on those definitions. This is something we obviously can't compare to census, but just an understanding of the distribution within the service. We've got a slim majority who are sworn, 44% are civilian. And on the right-hand side, this is very interesting because we captured a good distribution of ranks and seniority across the organization. But I did want to draw one thing to your attention, and that is the gender division within rank. Even though we had better parity than we did in 2014, we're still at a situation here where most of those who identify as female are at junior ranks, and there's relative parity at quite senior ranks, but it's those middle ranks. Sergeant, team lead, supervisor, staff sergeant, manager, supervisor of a unit, where 22% of those individuals are identifying as male. Only 10% are identifying as female. So in those middle ranks, to a 2-to-1 margin, we're skewing more male. So definitely something to be looking out for, promotion and advancement opportunities for women who are constable or civilian at the moment and looking to progress in their career. And this is neither here nor there for me, but just gives you a sense of the distribution of surveys. We've got a very good representation across all the different service lines for members. In terms of the schedule and work hours, we're finding that compared to 2014, and I think this is good news, that more are on a straight schedule and fewer are on shift work. We know that shift work can take a toll on people, particularly sleep and health, et cetera. And so those working straight shifts, it was 2/3 to 1/3 shift work over straight. And now we're roughly half, which is, again, I think good to see. And one area of note is that we have a higher proportion this year than in 2014 who say that they are temporary, that they're contract staff instead of a permanent hire. I don't know if that's a concerted effort to move in that direction. We know it's happening at universities and other places, but just something to note. Now, Chair Redmond, do you want me to pause there and see if there are any questions relating to the census before I move on to the member survey? Understanding the member survey is actually quite a bit longer.
That would be great, Sean. I'm just going to ask you if you can take your screen share
Yes.
down just for a minute. We'll see if there's any questions, and if not, you can continue on. Board members, does anyone have a question thus far? Okay. Go ahead, Ian.
Through you, Chair Redmond, just wanted to drill down on the ethnicity in the service, and it really may be a combination question for Sean, but also for the staff, because we are conscious about that and making plans. I saw something in the paper this weekend around some of the new members of the force. Is this and it's maybe to Sean and then to the chief, is this a pattern in other public institutions that you've surveyed, Sean, around that shift, and what are you seeing in other public sector organizations? And then I just wanted I know that we have plans and are working on this inside WRPS.
Yeah, I would just say that it's a general trend in all workforces that they tend to underrepresent communities, different ethnic communities, because it takes time, right? People that come and get hired right away, and organizations can't change their composition right away. You need people to retire, you need to replace them, et cetera. So just something to be mindful of over the next decade. How do we better represent that community in which we serve?
So Sean, one of the things that occurred to me, and I understand that you're sort of doing a pulse check and inventory, and demographics is every year, everybody gets 1 year older, and I get that. But I was trying to, in my mind, superimpose the level of education and the fact that most board members have been at the services where we welcome in new recruits, and many people are choosing policing as a second career or coming in with a lot of education that wasn't always the trend in previous years. Does that get reconciled anywhere, or is it a conversation for another time?
Yeah, well, I think it could be identified as a reason why the service appears to be getting a little bit older. And I don't mean to cause a red flag, or an alarm here. It's just something that if you go in another 3 years' time and survey, or 6 years' time and survey, and that trend continues, it could be a cause for concern.
Thank you. I see no more questions, so please carry on.
Sure, let me reshare my screen. Okay, and it looks like it's back up, great. So into the member survey, and I think there's, much like we saw strides in the census, there are broad improvements here that we've measured in the opinion survey, but still some work to be done. So if we just start out with a very broad measure, overall satisfaction, it's up 6 points. Back in 2014, it was 79%. In the fall of last year, it's 85%. So, all these other things that we're looking at obviously feed into satisfaction, the job satisfaction, and that's up by 6 points. So, congratulations. That's a terrific number. That's great to see. In terms of people's the perception of their role and how they contribute, we see more improvements. 82% up 4 points say they're working in a position they want. 72% up 21 points believe there are sufficient career opportunities within the service. More are interested in a management position, up 4 points. And the chief better watch out now here, because we have 37% who say that they aspire to be a part of the WRPS senior leadership team. That's up 10 points. You know, when people are happy, when they want to continue working in a job, when they see the path for advancement, these are all good things. I suspect that you're seeing less churn and turnover as a result of these scores, because people clearly like where they're working, and they've seen improvements since 2014. There's a new transfer process, and 2/3 say that they're knowledgeable of the details of that transfer process. And that was one thing we identified back in 2014, was there was the belief that it was a bit of a black box, that there wasn't transparency around that process. So it's good to see that people are becoming more familiar with that. And really good, well, I should say the companion piece on the bottom there is satisfaction with the direction of the new transfer process. 49% say that they are. That may sound bad, but you know, I think it was worse back in 2014. Just we didn't ask that very question, but the feeling around the transfer process was negative. So I think you know, in general, moving in the right direction. Really good to see here, 58% now, a majority believe that talented people are valued within the WRPS, and that's up 19 points compared to 2014. In terms of the overall direction, 71% said they support the direction of this board, so that's good news. 86% say they know what their unit's priorities are. Drops to 63% when it comes to the service. So obviously people more familiar with, you know, what's closer to them, physically closer to them. And so I think this is just that opportunity for communication, just making sure that's flowing down and understanding, make sure there's an understanding among the rank and file that they know what the priorities are and how that impacts their daily life. And in fact, the influence that the strategic business plan is having on daily work, life, and decisions is increasing. Back in 2014, only 1 in 3 said that the business plan was influential on them and how they operated. Now it's nearly half. So that's up 12 points in 6 years. So that's good news. In terms of the mission, vision, and values of the service, 3/4 say they understand the role they play in achieving. So that's good. If you feel you have efficacy, that's a good thing. 2/3 say they feel connected, even though only 1 in 3 could actually recite them. That's okay. I can't really recite Ipsos's values either, but I try to espouse them anyway. In terms of the culture, you know, this is really an area where there has been a lot of improvement. Back in 2014, you know, you could almost characterize some of the opinions as the belief that the service had a bit of an attitude problem. And it looks like there has been a really serious and significant and concerted effort to change that attitude, and members are seeing it. More believe it's an ethical organization, up 11 points. More believe that the work environment is free from harassment, that's up 7 points. More believe that opportunities for development are available across the entire service. The promotional process is more transparent. The disciplinary process is more transparent. Members of the same ranks and positions are treated fairly when it comes to how the standards are applied. All of these are up significantly, and some remarkably, 20 points or more. So, you know, I know this was an effort over the last 6 years. It is being recognized. Yes, there's still work to be done, but you've come a long way. And I think the members will appreciate seeing that progress that's been made. In terms of workload, people believe their responsibility is reasonable, the amount of work fairly reasonable, a little bit more doubt that the workload is shared fairly, that they have sufficient time to do the work. And you know, as a result, people are feeling the crunch, and they wish that there were more members to share that load evenly. Only 42% believe that staffing levels are adequate for the amount of work that needs to be done. And as a result, only 45% believe there are enough people to provide good service. There's one thing to say, yeah, well, I'm working hard, but it's not impacting the quality of service. Members do believe that there's a direct correlation there between the number of people we have and the service that we can provide. That said, you are a resilient bunch and a resourceful bunch. And the members believe that the overall quality of service is in fact high. 80% believe it is. A little less likely to believe there's enough equipment, time, or budget to provide good service, but by and large, a majority are doing the best they can with the resources they have. In terms of working relationships, again, the culture of the service looks good. People get along with their coworkers. They have access to their manager. They feel comfortable with their manager. They feel like they're a part of the team. Where there may be a little bit of a disconnect is, maybe there's a bubble that prevents a little bit of knowledge transfer from the outside in and the inside out. 72% say they feel they know citizens, their backgrounds quite well, but only 17% strongly agree, right? So there may be an opportunity here for training and just helping members understand more about the community that they serve. I think that would be well received. And maybe as a consequence of that lower level of familiarity, only 61% believe that the staff agrees on what citizens need, meaning 40% don't. 40% say, no, there's some conflict here about what is actually expected of us from our citizens. In terms of autonomy and decision-making, people feel that they are empowered to make decisions and to take on leadership roles. But we see fewer here. It's still 70%, but that means that 30% don't feel like they're involved in making important decisions, that things are a bit of a fait accompli before they reach them. And so that may be something to look at. Most say their work is interesting, that they are able to perform that their job is well suited to their skills, and that they're encouraged to develop their skills, and there's opportunities to do that. But some are saying that when they first started the job, it was a bit of a baptism by fire. They maybe weren't given enough training and orientation to feel comfortable in the role. Again, this is always hard. It's a baptism by fire almost everywhere. But maybe something to look at and making sure that people are feeling supported on those first days of the job before the training wheels are taken off. In terms of recognition and respect, again, it's good news on the values here. People feel respected. They're dealt with in a sensitive manner. They're listened to. They're getting praise along the way. A little less likely to believe that citizens value what they do for them. Again, I strongly disagree is quite small at only 19%. And I think that goes to my previous comment about the transfer of knowledge in and out and vice versa. There may be a bit of a barrier there. Interestingly, 60% agree that the WRPS cares about its people, which means 40% don't. So, and I think part of that is the statements that follow, and the belief that they have input into decisions that management makes, and that they're consulted when decisions that impact their daily lives on the job are being taken. So maybe a bit of an opportunity here to enhance the consultation and collaboration from top to bottom when making key decisions. That said, your members are happy. They're committed to being here. The working conditions are good. They're proud of the service. They believe it's a good place to work. There's good teamwork, and a growing proportion, 73%, up 4 points, say that if there was a vacancy, they would recommend the service as a place to work. So that advocacy is going up, and people feel that they are compensated well, and that the benefits meets the needs of their family. Very strong scores here. In terms of wellness, health and wellness, this is another area where we see very significant gains compared to 2014. There's an acknowledgement, a growing acknowledgement that mental health in the workplace is a priority for supervisor. That's up 21 points. That the service provides sufficient support for mental well-being at 20 points, and that mental health in the workplace is a priority for the service. It was only 40% last time. The scores were not good in 2014. They are improving significantly. 61%. It's not 100, but it's up 21 points, making good strides there. Still work to be done. And on the file of still work to be done, we see here that there is some agreement that work and duties negatively impact sleep, first and foremost. Obviously higher among people who work shifts, that it can have a negative impact on eating habits, self-care routines, home life, relationships, and we're seeing fewer members say that their home life affects their duties. So, still work to be done here. But clearly making strides, because the proportion who say that all of these things about work, fewer say that they are having a negative impact on their mental health. Stressful situations on the job down 14 points, workload down 12, finances, the supervisors having less of a negative impact on their mental health. So this is good. That work-life balance appears to be getting better. The supports provided to members of the service appears to be getting better. And as a result, work is having a less negative impact on mental health. Still, people would like more time to be volunteering, more time to be physically active, more time to be engaged in the community. But by and large, a majority are satisfied that they have enough time to do these things. And what's really interesting here is when we ask about, what other lifestyle supports or programs do you think you could benefit from? The mental health side of things has actually been fairly well addressed. It's now people are saying, geez, I could really use help with my physical health and nutrition, whether it's fitness programs, flexible working hours, access to gyms, a yoga room, healthy meal planning incentives. All of those now track ahead of mental health, because I think there's acknowledgement that you've done a good job in enhancing your supports over the last 5 or 6 years. In terms of communication, most are satisfied with the internal communications at the service. Only 21% are very satisfied. So clearly there's an opportunity for enhancements and move people up the scale there. And I think this is likely informing it. In terms of how often people are able to get the information they need, 58% say, well, I can always or mostly, I can usually get that information that I seek, but that means 4 in 10 are banging their head against a wall. They're not able to get what they're looking for. And we see similar scores here when it comes to managers' communication skills. And so while overall satisfaction is pretty high, satisfaction a little bit lower with this kind of one-on-one communication skills with a manager. And, a lot of it probably has to do similar at Ipsos. We're hired as researchers, then we rise into management. We don't necessarily get that management training. I think, similar things can be said about the service. You're hired as law enforcement professionals, and then you start rising up the ranks, and maybe you weren't provided with that training on communication skills and leadership skills. And I think that's an opportunity. Members are saying, maybe we could improve that flow, that dialogue between my manager and myself. In terms of how easy or difficult it is to find information that they're looking for, we saw on the previous slide that sometimes people struggle. 75% say it's at least somewhat easy. No, very few say it's very easy, only 13%. But then a quarter is saying, no, it's actually hard to find the information I'm looking for. And in terms of credibility, 75%, 3/4 say that they can, usually or confidently believe the information that's coming out about the WRPS, but roughly a quarter say that they're skeptical. They only believe it maybe half the time. And I don't know. I don't have any insight really on the source of that skepticism, where that's coming from. I don't know if it's competing messages from an association or other places, but just something to be mindful of. Where do people like to get their information? It's the intranet. And actually 3/4 use it daily. So it's a strong resource for people. They like the email blast, and they like face-to-face and verbal contact with their supervisor or a senior leader. They value that, and it's among the top ranks. Fewer, in a ranking exercise, so there's trade-offs. It doesn't mean that they don't like them, they just prioritize them a little bit lower, the newsletters and executive briefings. How do people want to be communicated with in the future? Text, print, email is far and away the preferred source of communication. In terms of education and training, we asked members what their preferred method of delivery is that suits their learning style. And we see practical exercises in small groups as number 1 and 2, but this is a little bit of a different strokes for different folks kind of thing, where sworn members are much more likely to prefer this kind of on-the-job practical training and exercises. And yes, civilians like that as well, but they also over-index a little bit on e-learning, on independent study. And so more for the civilians, you're going to want to make sure that you're providing a breadth of opportunities that best suit their learning style. In terms of where civilian members, I don't expect you to read all of this. I just want you to get a flavor. A lot of desire for Excel training. That's very exciting. I could benefit from some of that as well. But also more training for how to deal with members of the community on the phone to identify whether problems exist, de-escalations, conflict management, training on difficult conversations and emotional intelligence. So a lot of very good ideas here. And the chief and his team have a laundry list of verbatims of ideas to go through and identify a bit of a short list on what the top priorities are. For sworn members here, we see firearms training as a priority, judgment scenarios, officer safety, and IRD as being key opportunities for training there. The trouble here is that when we ask people if they encounter challenges when scheduling different types of training for their direct reports, and this question was only asked of leaders, 29% say yes for in-service training, training at the range, other training. But if we remove those people that say, well, it's not applicable, if you're a civilian, not getting trained at the range, for example, so we back those people out. And we find now that it's closer to 40% who say that they're finding challenges in scheduling training for direct reports. So that's a bit of a systemic roadblock that maybe can be addressed. And those challenges are related to staffing levels, workload demand. It's hard to get people away from their day-to-day jobs, and shift schedule logistics. If the availability of the training doesn't match up with when the shift work is happening, it can be difficult as well. And so I'm going to leave you some parting thoughts, and there's going to be 2 versions of the parting thoughts. One is going to be from the members, and again, another open-ended question that we coded and said, well, how can we continue to improve on the service that we provide here? And a lot of it has to do with process. There's no silver bullet here. Nothing shoots out at 50% of people saying one individual thing. That's it can be good and bad, right? Bad in that you have to dig a little bit for the direction, but good insofar as that there isn't one thing that is so egregious that all the members have focused on it. But a lot of it has to do with better transparency, and there's a transfer process again, and promotions, improving the diversity of members across all levels and ranks, and that may be one of those things that identified the gender gap in the middle ranks. Could be a challenge. Communication, we know there's always opportunities to enhance that. Better enforcement of policies and regulations, et cetera. So, and again, the chief and his team have the verbatims. There were over 200 members gave some thoughtful responses here. So very, very rich data. And the second version of the parting thoughts are going to come from myself and Mitra, just some key themes for you to focus on for the future. And one is to continue to improve upon your diversity, moving closer to the community that you serve, particularly when it comes to visible minorities, immigrant populations, and I think strengthening the ties and the links and the understanding between the service and the community, trying to burst that bubble that seems to stop the flow of information from the inside out and vice versa. Not just ensuring that the citizens have a better understanding of who you are and what you do, but making sure that you have a better understanding of who the citizens are, what the community is, and what they expect of you. The second is that, opening up a dialogue with members, remember a dialogue because they want to be part of that process, on needs for professional development and training. Just offering the courses and the programs isn't good enough. We need to make sure that we're creating the time and creating the opportunity for members to actually take that training in a way that doesn't cause them stress and difficulty in managing their day-to-day affairs. Build on existing mental health supports and promote work-life balance. Clearly, strides have been made over the last 6 years with many of those mental health metrics up 20 points. Still, they're only 60% or so. So in 6 years, I'll come back and want to see them at 80%. But clearly, you're doing a much better job than historically we're seen to be doing in 2014. And maybe look at that, some of these physical desires. How can we better promote physical well-being in the workplace? And the fourth opportunity here is communications. I said maybe some training for managers. Making sure that it's simple and clear, not just at an organizational level, but on that personal one-on-one basis. Keep using that intranet. People seem to really value that. And communication is much better received when people feel like they've been a part of the process in making those decisions. And I think that's what helps to build credibility. If they've been a part of the process, if they've been provided input, when they see the results, then they can see how they've impacted them, and they really value that. So, Madam Chair, I will go back to the Hollywood Squares and turn it back to you.
And now I will unmute. You think we'd all know that. Thank you very much, Sean and Mitra. Thank you. I assume you were the hand behind the curtain moving all of the slides through. So really a fulsome snapshot. First question to Tony and then Sandy. Tony, go ahead. You have the floor.
Oh, you're muted, sir.
You're muted, Tony. He just did that, so I'm not embarrassed that I did it.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes.
Go ahead, Tony.
Sorry about that. Through you, Madam Chair. First of all, thank you, Sean, for the presentation, and kudos to the chief, the deputies, and the management team. The overall direction of the survey is positive, and it looks like there's been strides made, and we'll provide for management some areas where we can focus a little bit more attention for robust programs. I do have a question for Sean. When I look at the promoter score, my understanding of promoter score is you have those people that vote that are promoting you and saying you're great. Then you have those people in the middle that are kind of neutral that say, yeah, I'm kind of liking it and I'm kind of not liking it. And they're neutral. They have really no promotion for you. And then you have those people at the end which are dissatisfied. And you really, like, at least for myself, I look at the promoter and the dissatisfied sections because the ones in the middle are kind of, as I say, neutral. I'm wondering, is very satisfied in this report, is that a promoter? Is that the high level? Because you've broken the, satisfied as somewhat satisfied and very satisfied. And when you compare that to 2014, it may give you a different view than if you just look at the promoter portion. Does that make sense, what I just asked you?
Yeah, that's a good question. While we often aggregate the scores, top to bottom to on a scale, you're right. Sometimes it's more instructive to look at the tails of the scale. And what we found just on the overall satisfaction question, for example, is that very satisfied went up by 3 points, while very unsatisfied went down by 2 points. So creating more advocates and fewer detractors. So it's in line with the general theme of improving scores.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tony. Sandy, go ahead.
Thank you. That was really, really interesting and well done. I really like the ability to compare it to 2014 and, where you didn't have the numbers there, you gave us a verbal comparison to the main thing. So I really like that. My question is regarding people that didn't respond. Is there any way that you get a sense either from other work you've done or, would those be people that are dissatisfied, or would they just sort of match the people that responded?
Yeah, our hope is that they're randomly distributed, meaning that they match the people who didn't respond. Typically, what we find is those people who are more on the tails. Those people who really like what's going on, or those who don't like what's going on, are the most likely to respond. The people who are, somewhat satisfied, maybe a little bit less likely to respond. So my general experience shows that non-response is apathy and not anger. And so I'm going to lean more towards the non-responses being randomly distributed, and that had we had 100% response rate, the results wouldn't be all that much different from what we saw here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Karen Schnarr, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was interested in the difference between sworn and civilian. So in the training slides, you broke down the difference. I'm wondering if you did that in any of the other categories, and if you saw differences between the two groups, or if it was largely the same, or that would be the next, like, an additional stage of analysis.
Yeah, well, certainly in the data tables, we have all of those breaks between civilian and sworn. And back in 2014, we actually did see fairly significant differences between those two groups of people. I think that a conclusion I made back in 2014 was that sometimes civilians feel like they're playing second fiddle, and we didn't see that to the same extent this time, which is why it isn't sort of routinely called out in the report. Are there differences? Sure, there are differences, but they're less than they were in 2014, and the chief and his team have all of that broken down in the tables.
I would agree with that. And in our full report, we actually have a slide that calls out a lot of these differences between sworn and civilian members. And just backing up what Sean just said here, it's actually the civilian members who are actually significantly more likely to agree that WRPS is a really good place to work. I mean, strong agreement across both groups, but it's actually skews higher among the civilians.
Great, thank you.
Are you good, Karen? I don't see any other questions. I had a couple. I think it was slide 41, but I may have missed the number. But it was the public perception of policing. And I know that funding of police and public perception has been under the microscope for months now. And so I guess I would expect to see that. I would think that would have an impact on our uniform and civilian staff as well. And I'm just wondering, do we have any comparators? And maybe this isn't a Sean and Mitra question. This may be a Mark Lode and Amanda question. Can we compare that with any other police services? Is that something you do, or is this just a report card on us, Sean?
Yeah, it's just a report card on you. I don't have any comparative information. Not a lot of services do something like this, and so you're to be commended for doing that. But it means that we don't have a sort of benchmarking.
So I don't know, Chief, if Amanda or Margaret would have, are there any comparators done if we're sort of an outlier in that we do this rigor with Ipsos Reid with our uniform and non-uniform staff? Do we have comparators with sort of how police services are perceiving public context that they deliver service in?
Thanks so much, Chair Edmund. And following up on Mr. Simpson's comments, we're a bit of an outlier. Obviously, our internal census and survey was significant. Average time 47 minutes to complete. The only other agency that I'm aware of, in my travels right now is Calgary Police Service has also done some significant internal surveying. Generally services do internal environmental scans around priorities and those types of processes. But again, do not have any comparators. Although, I would suggest that this doesn't come as a surprise to our service, based on the spotlight that has been on policing, fully understandable. Our members are citizens, they're consumers of media, they're consumers of social media, etc. So again, it just, what it does is it actually, I think the outcome of that particular piece is that how do we as an organization find opportunities to promote and support our members and the work that they're doing? How do we work with the board to showcase the work that they're doing every single day that is making a difference in the lives of our region? I think that we need, again, some concerted efforts to show that our people make a difference, our people matter. In that policing in a societal infrastructure has a role to play. And yes, we're always evolving and changing, but there's no specifics. This is a unique survey that I know many of my colleagues across the nation have been asking for copies of, because it is somewhat unique. And this is the second time we've actually used the expertise of an external party, obviously Sean and Mitra and team. And I think it's a good independent piece. It's also, totally independent. Although, obviously Ipsos has provided us data and verbatim pieces, all of the responses are protected, ensuring the privacy of our team, which allows for open, candid dialogue and feedback. So this is a bit of a unique approach, and I think the board should be proud of actually endorsing and approving. And it's a courageous task when you ask some of these questions, because we're monitoring the temperature of organization. So hopefully that provides some insight as to what's happening nationally and provincially. The only particularly comparable pieces is that, many different polling companies have done surveys on perception of police and sort of the whole allocation economic pieces, but surveys and services themselves have not actually asked their members how they're feeling or perceiving.
Thank you, Chief. I see Amanda and Margaret have both lit up their little Hollywood squares. So if you'd like to add, please feel free. No, you're shaking your heads no. Okay, thank you very much. And I guess, Sean, my other observation was that really the parting thoughts are really the culmination of all your work. And on behalf of the board, I want to thank you and Ipsos and your whole team for giving us some measurement by which we can hold ourselves and the service accountable. So thank you very much for your fulsome report. I don't know if you have any closing comments, Sean?
No, thank you, Madam Chair. And as a resident, I'm very pleased with the results and things are moving in the right direction. And I think the improvements and your dedication to continuing to improve can only be a benefit to the region. So thank you very much, Chief and Madam Chair.
So Sean and Mitra, thank you very much for all your hard work. And Amanda and Mark, I know you blackened your little squares, but thank you for all the ongoing service that you provide the board. Once we're adjourned, members of the media, and I see that a few of them have already joined, but anyone who is joining us by live streaming, if they want to use the link to Zoom and log in, Chief Larkin will be available to take questions. So thank you. I see no more hands, so I would entertain, Chief.
Sorry, Chair Edmund, maybe just as a closing a loop, obviously the information that Sean and Mitra provided are forming the foundations of our strategic business plan that we're working in partnership. And I do want to give a shout out to Jill Eglinton from the board, who's done significant work with our strategic services team. We have a series of draft goals and objectives, although, was wanted to wait to hear feedback on our internal survey and census survey from the board, particular questions, which will help formulate next steps. And obviously we're working very hard to finalize that so the board can approve that strategic direction for the next 3 years. And we can also comply. There's a compliance piece with the Police Services Act that, will advise the Solicitor General, et cetera, of our strategic direction. But it's a very exciting time for our police service, for our Police Services Board and our community. There's lots of, I believe, amazing things happening within our community, amazing things happening within our police service, our Police Services Board, Regional Council and area councils, to look at public safety and community health. And so this is an exciting time. I think the work that you've seen today will set the context, but it will also our leadership team to set the context for the next 3 years around how do we actually respond to what our membership needs, wants, desires are, but also particularly in the coming months, you'll see a significant recruiting strategy, including the launch of a new and improved recruitment video to highlight the region, to highlight our service. But I think, if you most recently, some of you have seen, for example, our Black History series. We launched series 1 this week, celebrating Black history in our community, in our province, in our country. But more importantly, we wanted to focus on our members, and so that they can share their personal journey and story with our community to provide insight. So we do obviously take to heart the feedback from Ipsos around we've made strides on diversity, but there's much room for improvement, particularly within our leadership ranks, which flows very nicely. So stay tuned for more. I just wanted to close the loop as to what the board can expect in the coming board meetings. We're obviously up against the deadlines and timelines, and we're working hard to do that so the board can actually then publicly announce the next 3 years. There's been a significant amount of work over the last 12 months to get to where we are today. So again, thanks to Jill, Amanda, and Marg, and to our external consultants from Ipsos. I think we're on a good process, and I do think that we're leading provincially and nationally on these matters, particularly in how we're actually soliciting information internally and externally. So again, thank you, Chair Redmond, and thanks to the team.
Thank you, Chief. And I have highlighted this before, but I would also like to underscore that every member of the board participated in focus groups with community groups who identified gaps in policing. And so I think all of us feel some ownership and some skin in the game, and it was good to interact with those focus groups, again, that were facilitated by Jill and Amanda. So thank you very much. And I know senior Waterloo Regional Police Service leaders were on hand, but so was the board. And I think that first person anecdote and discussion went a long way to informing the board as we go forward. So thank you for that. Seeing no other speakers, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. And again, just to underscore, the chief will stay with media to answer questions. Motion to adjourn is moved by Karen, seconded by Sandy. All those in favor? Thank you very much. This has been very enlightening, and I can say goodbye to the board. And Chief, I believe you and Sherry Green